Welcome to the State of Our Union, the podcast where real love meets real life. I am your host, Karen Williams, author, speaker, and wife of over 30 years. This is the space for honest conversations around marriage, commitment, conflict, healing, and learning how to choose each other daily. And it's even during the times when life gets heavy, because love isn't just about the vows we take. It's about the work we're willing to do together. Each week, we'll have conversations that inspire, challenge, and remind you that even through loss, disappointment, and change, your relationship can grow stronger. So wherever you're listening from, whether you're driving, cooking, working out, or lying in bed wondering if you're alone in this, just know you're not alone. So take a breath, lean in, and let's talk about the real state of our union. Hey, everybody. Welcome to season 2, episode 2 of the State of Our Union and the Fight to Keep It. I am Karen Williams, your host. And today I am excited to have my friend Fatima with me. She's going to talk a little bit about marriage and all the things. And like I mentioned before, season 2 is taking a little different direction. So we're going to focus on the wives this season, and they're going to share with us some of the things that they did or didn't do or learned that they should have learned or didn't learn. So we're just going to have an amazing conversation. Fatima, please introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them a little bit about yourself, a little or as much as you like.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for having me on. I'm
Of course.
excited to definitely share. My name again is Fatima Hurd. I am a mother of 3. I'm with my husband. Well, we've been together for 17 years.
Yay.
Um, and there's been a lot of ups and downs, and I wouldn't take anything back. I feel that's what helps us grow. But anyway, I'm also a branding photographer. I think photography has also been a way of showing me perspective when it comes to life. So
Yeah.
that's the relationship that I see with it. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. And that's how we met. Because at the time all I knew of you was Fatima as a photographer. And
Yeah.
then just to learn so much more about you, and it's so cool because as women, that's kind of how basically that's kind of how we roll. We're so multifaceted. So Fatima is not just a wife, she's not just a mom. She has all these other things going on as well and touches her community in so many different ways. But for the sake of time, we're going to dive into, just some of the nuggets and, wisdom that she is going to share with us when it comes to marriage. As she mentioned, you've been married 17, 18 years, 17 years.
Married together 17, married. Uh, s- oh my gosh. 2012, let's just say that. It's been a while. But yeah, we've
It's
been
been a
together
minute.
17 years. Yeah, it's been a while.
And that's
It's
okay, and that's okay
yeah.
because the joy of having a marriage, beyond 10 years is that we've
Mhm.
learned so much. We've gone through, a couple of seasons, and so that's what our conversation is gonna kinda, center around, today. So you kinda jump into the conversation and share with the audience, um, you know, what were some of the things that you learned as a wife, as a young mom? You can share a little bit about the blended family because that's, of course, we all know that that's one of those you know struggles or challenges that
Right.
married relationships can face. But yeah, go for it. Share as much as or as little as you like about that.
Well, thank you, Karen. Yeah. So again, like I mentioned, I've been with my husband for 17 years. When we entered our relationship, one thing and one expectation that I had and made very clear was, my son was my priority, you
Yes.
know. Um, and what was really interesting was that he took that to heart. And I
Mm.
remember our very first date. he was like, let's go on our second date, but bring your son. We can do it in a family environment. We can go bowling. We can do things like that. And so that was the first part of like understanding, um, it actually, it kind of threw me through a loop that he was more focused about me and my needs and the expectations that I had set.
Mhm.
Is the normally, at the beginning of the relationship, you're more about wanting to fulfill that other person's cup,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And not
Yeah.
your own. And when you receive it, I think that's when I had my first realization of the, um, the lack of safety that I felt. Um, going to let me rewind a little bit. My previous relationships, I was very independent,
Mhm.
very, and I think that when we entered this relationship, um, I didn't understand safety. I didn't understand that he was making me feel safe. And that was a big struggle, especially when you're always in independence mode, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when we entered when he was open to that and he was open to meeting my family, it was too much for me to handle. I was like, "Oh my god," like, I'm used to having relationships take 8 years
Yeah.
before it really happens, and this guy is going, like, full circle, like, within a few weeks, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is just too much for my brain right now," you know? Because I had habits, and
Yeah.
those habits, were habits I created. I would sit in relationships for a very long time,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
when I meet someone who is serious and ready to move forward, I'm like, "Whoa, this is just too much,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I didn't know how to communicate that to him,
Mhm.
and so but I was also open to it because it
Mhm.
was different from what I was used to, but
Right.
it was scary, but I was just like, "Oh, this is so I don't how do you deal with it?" But
Yeah.
I trusted, even though I didn't know here, I
Yeah.
knew it here,
Yeah.
that it was something that I didn't know then that I know now that I wanted,
Mhm.
right? Was feeling safe. And so then, moving forward, going into the relationship, there was you know, a lot of stuff, baggage that we carry from
Yeah.
one, what our environment models as we're growing
Mhm.
up, and
Mhm.
two, what we carry from previous relationships
Yes.
that I didn't realize I was bringing into this relationship. And those are things that are not spoken. We speak about like how that person hurt me, but we
Yeah.
never speak about what we didn't do right in that relationship, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And I
And I wanted to add to that, you when you mentioned, not being able to recognize that safety, I know when we were talking earlier, we were talking about, we come into the relationship with, of course, bringing all of the baggage and all of the familiarity with, that we have with those relationships. And what's so crazy is we are so familiar with, I mean, we can call it chaos, we can call it whatever we want. We're so familiar with that unhealthy that when healthy shows up, we're like, okay, well, this is different. Like who is this guy being nice to my son like right away? How come how come it's not taking me 3 or 4 years to recognize that, okay, this is okay. We're in a steady flow.
right,
you so that, and the reason I paused you there, because I want our audience to really hear what you're saying there. You know, it may a lot of times when we enter relationships or into our marriage, we go in with, again, with the baggage. We think familiarity is chemistry until things just started going haywire, you know. And I love how, even though it wasn't the norm for you, you were able to say, "Hmm, let me see where this is going." You didn't resist it. Why? Because there are others that were like, "Okay, no, I don't do this, whatever this is," but you were able to, you made the conscious decision to stay in the moment and just follow your heart and walk it through. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for
Yep.
that clarity. And it's true. We don't know it at the time, but when we do follow and trust our intuition, it's leading us. And I think I've anchored my life around that,
Yeah.
if something feels right, you continue with it. Especially when you're coming from a place of the unknown, when you know where you've been, but you don't know where you're going, and
Mhm.
then you're treading waters that you're not familiar with. My husband's very different from, you know, anybody I had dated in the past.
Mhm.
Um, he's very decisive and he knows what he wants, all the things that I'm not. And that I was very uncomfortable with when we started. But there was also this sense of excitement, right?
Right.
And there was this sense of like, and I think at that point I realized, well, if it hasn't worked in the past, it doesn't hurt to try something new.
Mhm.
With that, though, came all these other challenges as our
Right.
relationship started to flourish
Yes.
because, he comes, and I actually was thinking about this, and at that point, I'm not coining this, but this is something that came in. It's like a little saying. I'm like, that's when when two different paths came together to enjoy the journey, not the destination.
Yes.
Because destination for me, life is ever evolving. We're not destination is not one particular event. Our
Yes.
destination, it was going through the process. He didn't have any kids. So he
Mhm.
had to learn like how to be a dad. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing was I was like, you are. From the minute you met my son, that was instilled in you. That was something that came with you. And I was just amazed with his relationship with my son. Even
Yeah.
to this day, 17 years later, 18 years later, like the way my son sees him, and he earned that, and that was his right as a father even
Mhm.
before he knew it. And
Yeah.
so, like I said, going into the relationship, it was, you know, it's not I let go, I surrendered the expectations of where we had to be in certain places. Because, girl, let me tell you, the wanting to be, we were always like, okay, someday we're gonna be, rich enough to do this. Not
Yeah.
realizing we were rich that entire
Yes.
time. We were rich with memories. We were rich
Yeah.
with the experience of being parents. And then my second son came, and then the birth of my daughter came, and all that was the wealth, the riches of our relationship. But
Yes.
even with that, we still carry, and going back to the emotional awareness,
Mhm.
the hurt and the pain from the past that
Mhm.
interfere with the present. And
Mhm.
a big one for us was, was healing, how to heal from that. And
Yes.
girl, let me tell you, the relationship prior to my husband, my son's dad,
Mhm.
was such an incredible experience
Yeah.
because it brought his relationship brought so much contrast to ours that helped us grow. And
Yes.
now we all get along so well, and we always have. But the
Mhm.
challenges of two different people trying to raise the same child
Yeah.
as a father,
Yeah. I
and
can.
seeing my son take the best of both worlds, and me being caught in the middle. And it's when we let go of all the pain that we're
Yes.
able to see the contributions,
Yes.
the pain I
Yes.
had with his dad, and the
Yeah.
contributions that he actually brought to the table. And then
Yeah.
allowing my husband, or not allowing, but my husband saw that prior
Mhm.
to even I seen that, even when I saw it, because I remember I'd complain about something and he's like, let's just take a step back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's still his dad, and I'm like, he always would ground me. He is my rock. And
Yeah.
I would get that fiery, like, and it's like, take a deep breath. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
And at the very beginning, I even felt like, are you on his side? How dare you?
Of course we think that.
But that was the pain and the hurt talking
Yes.
from
Yeah.
that previous relationship. And
Yes.
and
Yes.
he would close it out with, do you love your son? Yes. What kind of question
Mm.
is that? So
Yeah.
do I. But
Yeah.
that's his dad.
Yeah. When you're talking about those blended family. And so the non-custodial parent, when your spouse start developing a relationship with with the non-custodial parent, what end up happening is they get to see them strictly from their whatever their perspective is of them.
Yeah.
For the most part, that because that mature spouse, they shouldn't just be listening to your side or your perspective.
Yeah.
So the point is, they they didn't have the emotional hurt. They didn't go through whatever that emotional damage or whatever that pain was. So they're not
Yeah.
experiencing them from that perspective. So it's even, and I say it's a good thing because then that doesn't get in the way of how the children are being raised. That doesn't get in the
Exactly.
way of how they develop emotionally. But they, again, like you said earlier, they get to take the best of both dads and become even a better person. Because, that's one of the joys in our relationship was that I came to the marriage with a son. My husband came with two sons, and so we had one together. And yeah, it's their moms have always been about the kids. It's always been, what do they need? What do they want? We're not talking about these volatile dramas that happen
Yeah.
in these relationships. It's always about the children. And so it's good to hear that is more, that's getting more commonplace, where the children are the what you say, the focus, and not our emotional, whatever the emotional chaos we have going on, in between us.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah. No, it is. And the interesting part is that the hurt and the resentment and the disappointment didn't just end there. It was also reflected in our relationship in
Yeah.
regards to like things that he would say, or, and how I would take that. And then it triggers, there triggers, right? Like, oh, here we go. Right. And so, the first years, it was difficult, but, you know, when there's this thing I call, and I didn't really have the name yesterday when we talked, but it's called the love audit,
Mhm.
right? And it's when you sit and you journal all the things that you bring to the table and all the
Yes.
things that he brings to the table. And one interesting thing is that it changes with the
Mhm.
season,
Yes.
right? Because every time that, you know, we move forward, as we spend more and more time together, like I think I mentioned to you before, my husband helped peel back those layers,
Mhm.
allowing me to flourish and really come into who I was and not the expectation of who I thought I was supposed to be.
Right.
Which goes back to the independence. It's like, I felt that if I lost my independence, then what would happen if we ever broke up or something happened,
Mhm.
right? Well, that
Mhm.
doesn't have to happen, and I don't
Right.
need independence. The independence is only needed if you really it's I think that is where the confusion lied,
Mm.
It was like, allow myself to feel what he's offering, which was to feel safe and to love me. He's a family man, and I didn't understand
Mhm.
that, you know, I didn't understand it,
Yeah.
and and so I think that's where it helps to really look inward
Mhm.
instead of
Mhm.
outward. I think I mentioned before, like when we first started and we would get upset with each other, my mechanism to dealing with it was shut down. I ain't
Yeah.
talking to you for a whole week. Like, I'm not gonna deal with you until I am ready to talk. And you know what's funny is we never talked. I would push it under the rug and life would carry on. And then the same thing would happen and happen until it finally got to a point where I'm like, are you serious? Is this really happening again? Like, we
Yeah.
really nip it in the butt.
Yeah.
And I remember during that process, I was so overcome with pain and resentment. I remember now him always saying, "What can I do to
Mhm.
help you explain or tell me what it is that's bugging you? What did I do?" And I
Yeah.
often go through that. What did I do? But I think we can't explain what we need when we don't know what we want,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's a lot of
And
times we don't have the language. Yeah.
right. Or the experience.
Right. Right.
Because for me, like all this was new. Like the love, I think I mentioned to you, the
Mhm.
daily text messages when he goes to work and says, I love you, have a great day, that
Yeah.
have never stopped in the last 17 years.
Yeah.
And these little things that I wasn't used to. And so now, becoming aware slowly with time how I was showing up for my relationship. Because at the
Yeah.
beginning, like we said, it's the honeymoon stage. Then the
Yes.
babies start to come. Then your hands are full. Then you're busy. But at some
Yeah.
point, it's gonna be pivotal where you have to stop and actually acknowledge
Yeah.
what keeps putting us in those same cycles. And
Yeah.
sorry,
Because God, because I know your story, so it's like I don't know, I want to talk about it all. But
yeah.
what role did we talked a little bit about this, but what role do you think that the difference in the cultural difference played in how you guys showed up, or even how you guys processed some of those challenges in the early years? Because you know I know for me, as I've mentioned on the show many times, I'm originally from Jamaica. We're loud people. We show up big in all of our spaces and we take up space, right? And so a lot of times when my husband is around my family, he's usually just sitting back like he's watching a tennis match, and until he learned the dialect a little bit, he had no
Yeah,
idea what was going on. But, he's, it played such how we process things, how we deal with conflict. Even regular conversation sometimes can sound super loud, or, like, wait a minute, what is happening right now? But so share with the audience a little bit what role you think some of those differences in culture actually played.
absolutely.
Mhm,
Thank you for that.
mhm,
Yeah, that was a big one for us. As I mentioned before, being Hispanic, Mexican,
mhm.
I come from a background where, we use our hands a lot and we're
Yeah.
very passionate and our voices tend to raise,
Mhm.
when we want to get a point across. And so my husband's very subtle and calm, he's white and he's just looking at me like, can you just tone it down a little because it's just too much. And I'm like, but this is how I talk and I got to get my point across. And actually, I think that's where the part of the cultural, I remember growing up, my mom would do the same thing. Like when she would be, trying to get her point across, it was like she was loud. And so I remember with time, he would just zone out.
Yeah.
It was like, we're too much right now. And,
You're
you know,
excessive.
and he's just I'm like, "What? What?" And of course, I'd be triggered. "What is there an
Right.
issue? Is there a problem?" And it was funny. Obviously, in my head, it sounds like that. I don't think I was too overwhelming, but you know, uh, but with time, it's interesting because that's where two people come together, and so
Yes.
I learned to tone it down slightly because I'm not
Mhm.
changing who I am. It's just who I am. I'm
Right.
passionate.
Right.
But he's learned to love it, and he's learned
Mhm.
to also now he's, like, starting to really vocalize and use
Mhm.
his voice, and so it's not yelling, but now he's kinda meeting me there as well, which,
Right.
and like you said, being in when we're with family and he's like, "Okay, I'm used to it now."
Yes.
At first it
Yeah.
was like, "Oh my god, that's a lot," and, you know, but again, it goes back to, actions, right?
Yeah.
It was a lot for him. And sometimes I think, and I want to touch on this. I remember being triggered by it.
Mhm.
So I would remember thinking like, does it bother you to be around my family? Cause I'd look at him and he's like,
Yeah.
what? you know? And I'm
Yeah.
like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, nothing. I'm just trying to process. And
He's
I
trying to
think that's
absorb it all.
yeah. But again, going back to helping him understand,
Yeah,
no, people aren't fighting. This is how we get along. This is how, this is what we do,
yeah.
and then of course everybody is always trying to talk over each other.
Mhm.
Like we're just very expressionate and loving and happy,
Yeah,
festive people. But it's not that, again, it's just he's so used to coming from a very calm place, right?
yeah.
Like, um, even music, he's like, "Oh my god, that's a little too loud." And I'm like, "Put it up." And he's like, "Oh my god, you're gonna blow my ears out." But he's
Yeah,
learned to appreciate it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so that's where, again, compromise is a big one,
Mhm.
learning how to, and I don't even like the word compromise because it's not compromise. He was able to see it through my eyes, see it
Yes.
through what makes me happy. And, when the music comes on,
Mhm.
my life, like my everything about me changes. And I think that's what he enjoys,
Yes.
the environment and just how happy it makes me. And I think that makes him happy as well. So
Mhm.
you learn to appreciate those things, right? But yeah, it's even raising our children, growing up, I was
Mhm.
always the chancla. Remember the chancla? I don't, are you familiar with that?
What's a chunkler?
Okay, so if you go, and every Hispanic is familiar, like when you were bad as a child, mom would
Mhm.
always get the sandal. And she'd be like,
Oh, well,
the
yes.
chancla.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And I would always be like, I'm gonna get the chancla, I'm gonna get the chancla. And my husband was like, are you serious? Never use the chancla, right? But that was just that's a saying that we use. I'm gonna use the chancla. And
Mhm.
my husband's like, what? Like, I mean, even raising the kids was very
Yeah.
different. He's loving, and I'm not saying I'm not understanding. I'm
Yeah.
understanding, but see, this is how I talk. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
again, he was, especially with my son being
Mhm.
very a protective mother, you know, um, there was certain expectations I even had on my son that my
Yeah.
husband helped, like, hey, like maybe let him be a little bit more free. And,
Yes.
you know, uh, he played the role that he was the influence that my son needed and I needed to
Mhm.
help guide him, because I feel that as a parents, you need the contrast of both personalities.
Yes.
And my son didn't have that the first year,
Yeah.
2 years of his life. And so
Yeah.
I was the sole, like, influence in his life. And so
Mhm.
then he came to help facilitate that by
Yes.
adding more um calm to the storm,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
was soothing. And I
Yeah.
think is what makes him such an amazing human right now. My son is very well,
He's
I mean,
well-rounded.
rounded, yeah.
It's and that's the important thing about, I'm by no means am I telling anyone that they have to stay in an unhealthy relationship. But when we're talking about when children are in the equation, we want to create environments where they are being, raised in a healthy way. They're gaining the good of both worlds. Um, yeah, so of course my husband is American, coming from a Caribbean background, so my kids are like, even now as adult, because all my kids are adults, um, they are like, it's, they're like, Mom, there's a lot of things that this stack on social media is teaching us. I understand some things you did.
Yes.
It's like, "Oh, that's a Jamaican thing." Yeah, and the thing is because of that's who I am, I didn't think
Right.
that I needed to explain the cultural background behind why I say, "Go sit in the corner. Don't talk to me right now,"
Yes.
or, there's raised voices, just having regular conversation,
Yeah.
but for when our partners are able to, to empathize with us, stepping into our shoes and understanding that, yeah, this is where, that's coming from. My husband being that calm as well, he
Yeah.
understood that, okay, that's just her. That's just all of, that's her makeup. I'm not here to change that, but he knows when to just kind of bring that, what I said, that calm into the equation, and I'm not just losing it. Of course, when my kids messed up and I pick up a shoe and just sail it across the room, he's like, girl, you cannot throw things at the children. You cannot do that. Like, wait, what? Things were thrown at me.
All the time. I turned out
Bruh,
okay.
bruh. I mean, I turned out fine. At least I think I was, and
Right?
that's the crazy thing. We did think we turned out fine until we got in relationships and realized, wait a second, no, that's not healthy. We don't, we don't do that around here.
And that was a big one.
It's like,
Yeah.
no, discipline, we use our words. We don't,
Yeah.
we don't act it out, and all that. So
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about learning the definition of each other's love. What did that look like for you? The way, because obviously the way he loved and the way you loved were completely different. So share a little bit about what his looked like, what yours looked like, and how you guys were able to merge the two.
Thank you for right now. When you said that, this word, the biggest word that popped up was judgment. Um,
Mm,
one thing I could, yesterday when I was thinking about it, I've never felt judgment on his behalf,
yeah.
you know, um, and that's a big one for me, when when we, through all these years, his love language has been feed me. You know, um, I love food. I love food. Like the way, and he would tell me the way to my heart is through food, right? And the interesting part of that is growing up, I was never in the kitchen. My sister was the one that was known for cooking and she did all these great dishes. And so as I got older, a lot of the time I lived alone. So I would just go to mom's house for dinner. And so then I
Right.
meet this amazing guy and he's like, the way to my heart is through food. And I'm like, oh
Oh,
shoot.
oh,
I
oh.
remember our first day, he's like, well, you're Mexican, make me like a great Mexican dish. Girl, I burned the rice. I said, we're going out for Mexican.
Okay, meet me at a restaurant.
Yeah. But going
Yeah.
back to the layers,
Yeah.
we don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And I felt love in the sense of learning to want to and wanting to learn to cook. And then I
Yeah.
found out I was amazing at it.
Mhm.
Isn't that the crazy part?
Mhm.
Is
The gift was in there,
that
girl. It was in there.
yeah, it was in there and he pulled that out, because he was always very open about, all it takes for me is just feed me. Like he can barbecue and everything, but you know, I realize now that it's the sense it's for him is knowing that you are for and the way he grew up, his mom was she's Italian and
Mhm.
way she showed love was cooking for the world. And
Mhm.
you see how he processes love through that. And
Yeah.
even though he can cook and he cooks amazing, for him it was like, what are you gonna make for dinner today? Like I wanna know what your food tastes like. And
Yeah.
he loves it. I mastered some of his mom's dishes and to him that's all it took.
Yeah.
And so again, going understanding the love language was mm, you know, g- learning wanting, there's a difference.
Yes.
Wanting
Yes.
to cook. Because when I felt like I had to cook the very first day, it was like I burned the rice. But then after, it was, I'm enjoying this part. Like, I
Yeah.
enjoy that I can create this. And so that's when it turns into love, when you're like, you're teaching me things about or you've pulled things out of me that's where the self-discovery comes in. I didn't realize I love to cook
Yes.
until way later and that I was good at it. Right. And, again, for me, it was more of like, my expectations when I entered the relationship were very superficial. It was like, I wanted, in my brain, and unfortunately, and I want people to understand that, you know, that's how I for me, that love was to, celebrate you and love you and buy you, shower you with gifts. Oh, and by the way, I want that back too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my husband
Yeah.
wasn't like that. My husband was like, for Valentine's Day, I think I shared this with you.
Yeah.
I'm like, where's my flowers? And like, my, 14 karat gold or whatever, this and that. Like, I'm expecting something big. And he's like, I love you every day. Like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. Like, wait, celebration? Like, oh, you don't do celebrations? And he's
Yeah.
like, no, like, why would I have to tell you one day of the year that I love you when I can tell you
Yes.
every day of the year that I love you?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but my brain at the moment was like, because everybody else is doing it. And
Doing
that's
it.
what I'm
Yes.
thinking. Well, because everyone else is doing it, because everyone is showing the amazing, amazing days that they're having.
Yeah.
And when I stopped looking outward, and then I realized, that his actions and his love, well, his love is through his actions, which is, you know, she loves coffee. I'm going to go get her coffee. Hey, I brought you your coffee. Or
Yes.
those little things that we tend to overlook and take
Yes.
for granted, and that's where, again, the love language. And now when I look back, I realize how very open he was with what he needs. And when you're closed off, you don't get it
Mm-hmm.
until
Mm-hmm.
you, until you process it.
Yeah.
Um, and then the biggest part of that was when he kept asking me, like, how, what do you want? What do you need? And I
Yeah.
couldn't explain it. I didn't
Yeah.
know until the years went by and I realized that I love what I had with him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And this,
Yes, it's the safety that he brings.
yes,
Just his presence bring a level of safety where again your head was trying to find that word to put to it, but there's no word. It's just the presence.
yeah,
Just him showing up every day. It's not necessarily the text he sent every day, but it's the reassurance that he's there is what that text represent. Him saying, yes, I love you every day. I don't need February 14th to tell you that I love you. That's him. Again, mind you, in my opinion, I think, the rest of the world, they may only have February 14th, but
yeah,
he's like, no, you have 365 days of February 14th. You know what I
correct.
mean? And so what I'm hearing there is the level of safety and reassurance that he brought just being present was more than, and I think probably in my marriage the same. I had this issue where I just did not again being a single mom and then showing up and I had everything figured out. I really don't need you in that capacity. Um
Right.
you said you didn't talk to each other when you get in conflict, what have you, like not talking for a week. Okay, audience, I was not that bad. I just didn't talk for 3 days. And so again, it's easier. It was so much easier to just shut down. But I
Yeah.
love the way when you pointed out that he would constantly say, "What do you need?" Again, that level, pulling away that layer and
Yeah.
pushing for that self discovery. I want you to vocalize what is it that you need, and in those moments, I learned, what my own again, it's always us, child. Trust it's us. It's me. I am the problem. you know, but what they call that bids for affection or bids
Yeah.
for connection, and what those moments create is a level of safety for both of you.
Yeah.
It also teaches us as married couples how to reconnect afterwards, because that sends the message: how are we going to bring up the next conflict? Are we safe enough to bring up that next thing? What is that hurt that I'm maybe processing that I don't know how he's going to react? Well, he has a trend of showing up and
Mhm.
making me feel safe so I can believe in that. You know
Yes.
what I mean? I can rest in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's big. That I my husband was emotionally available at
Yes.
that. I I wasn't. I wasn't, you know, because and I want to bring this up because right now I just had something show up for me.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I've been asking and I'm just now realizing having this reflection with you.
Yeah.
Um my relationships ended many times during conflict um because I couldn't explain what was going on. But the truth is, sorry, I just had that escape.
That's
I
okay.
didn't know how to answer that when he asked me. And I think that's where I went to work
Yeah.
was I was when we had the conflict and he said, "What do you need?" I literally was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
"Oh my god, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what I need." And the thing too is that our brains self-sabotage
Yes. Yeah.
because at that point I'm like, "Well, then now you're going to leave."
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Nope, I'm going to stick around and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to keep asking." you know, until you figure it out. And this is where I was explaining about judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was never about judgment for him. It was always like, you know, um, I know who you are. I
Yeah.
see who you are. And, I'm just waiting for you to see that as well. And I can see it in his eyes. I can see it in his eyes, like the way his body language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, previous relationships, it was like hard and walking away like whatever. With him, it
Mm-hmm.
was just that holding space. And then
Mm-hmm.
when you're ready, we'll talk,
Yeah.
and it's years of stuff that you carry. And that's the beauty of it is that one, I was able to see that. I was able
Yeah.
to catch on to his body language. But I also, as the cycles kept coming or the conflict kept coming and it was the same thing over and over, the body language started to change from
Yes.
holding space to I'm getting really tired. You really need to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's at that point is where for me it was like, okay,
Oh,
why
shoot.
does it feel yeah, like,
Yeah.
you feel it in your heart, like your stomach, there's a hole in your stomach when he does not react the same way.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Is this it?" And then
Yeah.
your brain's like, "See, I told you," the self-sabotage. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other part of you goes, "Oh, that's unacceptable. No,
Mm-hmm.
we need
Mm-hmm.
to figure this out soon." And so
Mm-hmm.
that's when you start, for me, I started doing the work of, you know, when things conflict would happen,
Mm-hmm.
you know, courage to say, "This bothered me, and
Yes.
I see it this way,
Mm-hmm.
and I reacted this way because that's how I perceived it." And then he would turn around and go, "Oh my god, I am so sorry. That's not what I meant." And I'm like, "No, you didn't? Wait, what? Excuse me?" You know? And he was like, "Babe, this is what I was trying to see." And then it was like, "Oh, this is really good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna mad at you.
This
That's gonna be a week."
look, this rhythm of
Yeah,
communication, there's
this
something
is
to it.
good.
Like, what
Because now
happened
my
here?
brain isn't telling me stories.
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
hiding. That whole week was my brain telling me stories of why I
Yes.
was right and he was wrong and
Yes.
why I need to stay independent and not like da 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 da. And I'm like, wait a minute. So now,
Mhm.
because I did speak and I did tell him what was wrong,
Mhm.
and it was my words. It was like I perceived it this
Yes.
way because I've had this experience.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yes.
what? Are you kidding
Yes.
me? Like, that's not what
Yes.
I intended to say or do.
Yes.
And I'm like, you didn't? And that's where it was like, there's no judgment there. He just saw it a certain way, but my brain was like, oh, validation. There it is.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Mhm.
so
Man, that is so profound because I think a lot of marriages end right there.
yeah, they
It's
had,
right there. That's that crossroad. Am I going to show up and be vulnerable? See, for me, it was, my processing was in that 3 days where my brain tells me how basically how invalid I was. And, the same words that I used to hear from previous relationship, those same baggage, we bring him in and we use those same lens to process the same situation. Now, what I love there is we talked a little bit about, that one scripture in Proverbs 27:17. It talks about iron sharpening iron, and so does one man sharpens the other. Now, when we first go into our relationship, we are building something brand new, and there's never a time that we go to make a masterpiece where we don't have to chip away at some parts of it. We have to reshape it. We have to, get that chisel and, break things. Well, that doesn't feel good. And so in that chipping away, I've always said, it's the, that's the painful part. That's where you go into that, the layers are, being revealed. But I love the perspective that you brought to it when we were talking, before. And you said we're literally chipping away the baggage that we brought. So talk a little bit about that. What would that look like for you? What was some of the, what did that experience for you look like?
Well, initially it was like I said, the trigger, right? You go through the
Yeah.
process of the trigger. Um, and then when we were working through it, like I said, when I finally spoke my truth,
Mm-hmm.
or how I felt, there was a sense of calm prior to that when we chip at it. That's what he was doing every time we would have that conversation. He would go back to I just wish you knew what you wanted, or I wish
Mm.
you would understand. And, you know, sometimes, even though it feels like we're doing the same thing over and over,
Yeah.
um, every time that person holds space for you, and like in his case, he was loving me without judgment. It was having me question, would he continue to ask me? It was writing down and understanding, why is he being persistent?
Yeah.
I think I told you about self-sabotage, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, at that point, my brain's like, "Girl, he's not giving up." Like, he's
Mm-hmm.
still at it, like, he's still asking.
Yes.
At what point are you gonna understand what you want,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that is where, once you peel off those layers and you start to think of the contrast, what you have now,
Yeah.
what you had before, and how those two emotions feel, and the
Yeah.
difference. Because again, this is how I was able to identify my resistance to safety.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was when I realized that I didn't have to be defensive. And he
Yeah.
would tell me too, and that was a part that hurt, was that he's like, "Why do you have to be defensive? I'm just trying to get something across." And if I say, "Why did you buy that shirt?" You just get defensive. And it's like,
Mhm.
he's not judging me. He's
Yes.
asking a question. And it kept leading into conflict, but we have to do the work where, when
Yes.
you are ready to change, to make the change, you have to have the courage to face the truth. And the truth is, are you being unrealistic?
Yes.
Are you not wanting to hear it? Because then you just get the same results.
Yeah.
You know, be him,
Yeah.
it could be anybody. And I think that's where he had um, the
That.
emotional, yeah, to support that, and
Mhm.
help me and continue. But even that, at some point, it was gonna break him
Yeah.
if I didn't
Yeah.
get it sooner, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I, again, with time, you know, how he showed up for me helped me understand that he wasn't going anywhere,
Yeah.
unless I didn't shift.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I heard my pastor say this, and I said I'm going to give him credit for a few times, and then it's going to be my quote. But he said he said you know commitment says um we let me make sure I get it right. Because in marriage, what we tend to do is, I am leaving if you don't fix this. But what commitment says, I am not leaving, so we better fix this.
Yes.
You know, because that's the first thing we throw up. That's what our brains are used to. Okay, this ain't working, so I'm out.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm not going anywhere, this gotta be fixed
Yeah.
because I'm not staying here in that situation, you know. But so the focus doesn't become about me leaving. The focus becomes, we're fixing this together,
Yes.
you know.
That is true. I again sitting here and talking, one thing when we would have conflict, he would say, and those were his words, I'm not going anywhere.
Hmm.
No, I'm in it for the long run. And, going back to my baggage, that's the point where most would say, I'm done.
I'm done. Hmm.
And I'm like, my brain kept getting confused. Like, huh?
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know? Um, and again, it goes back to, you know, um, those cues were there from the very beginning of the relationship, you know? And
Hmm.
even though I didn't understand those cues at the beginning, I knew it was good. And
Yes.
and and it's not about, it really isn't about, who's wrong or right. It's
Right.
about aligning, and he met me where I was, and he carried me through with love.
Yeah.
And and more importantly, was helping unveil and allowing me to see my self-worth
Yeah.
and how much I deserved it. Because
Yeah.
again, I'm gonna be honest, Karen, I've been in this transformational self, development for many years,
Yeah.
and it's still in the works. I'm still going through it. And, the goal is to leave the legacy for our children and our grandchildren,
Hmm.
right? And I couldn't have found a better person to have supported that journey.
Yes.
Because again, there wasn't any judgment. And at the very beginning, I couldn't see that because I was so overwhelmed with my own stuff. And that's
Yeah.
where we talk about the chipping away. He kept at it, kept at it, kept at it
Yeah.
until I was able to see the full picture of what he's brought, to this relationship and the commitment. And it is about commitment and sticking with it until,
Yep.
that person is ready, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
And it's the level of self-assurance that he already has. He's come into the
yes,
relationship with what we call in the coaching space is the secure attachment. He's like, okay, I'm good with who I am, and I'm here to just bring out the best out of you, the best of you, who you are. Basically what he has already recognized, what he has already seen and
yeah,
know that's already in there that, I'm looking in the mirror like, I don't know what you see over here, but anyway, fine then. You're sticking around. All right. I wake up, here we are, wake up 33 and a half years later and okay, he's still there.
and still loving you
Still
from like
loving
like
me.
day
Still,
one.
he's not moved by he's not moved by the silk cap on my head. He's not moved by the no makeup. Because it's never
Right?
been, secure men like that, or, secure partners like that. They will, they're not moved by this exterior stuff.
Oh,
And so even though we, and I say we, because I know you and I we take up space. We have big personalities, we don't hide who we are. We walk in a room and this is it. What you see is what you get.
right.
And so we're not, the moment that we think someone is trying to, make us feel small is we coming out with what is it, claws extended. 'Cause we're not about to do that.
Right.
So having, we could only be married to people that are secure in themselves, even though insecurity was what was leading a lot of who we are. That was a lot of our identity
Yeah.
was so wrapped in that insecurity. And so with that, I wanted you to talk a little bit about if you were to sit down with say pull one of our audience members and put them in the hot seat and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, girl, let me have a conversation with you." What would you tell them? Um, I want to kind of touch on three things, but what would you tell them about first about communication? What would
Mhm.
be your advice that, hey, I didn't know this coming in, but this is what I would want you to know.
Um, the first thing is understanding because communication is there's a variety, right?
Yes. Yep.
Um, understanding what kind of communication it is for them, um,
Mhm.
and more importantly, uh, being comfortable and courageous to speak your truth when it comes
Mhm.
to being open with what you want. Um, you don't get communication is actually the it's the language for everything, for all
Yeah.
of our relationships,
Yeah.
especially the ones that, you know, um with our significant other, but
Mhm.
so what I would say is first understand how you're communicating because many times we think we are communicating, but we're not, you know.
Yeah.
We are find your words, know
Yes.
what you're trying to communicate, and understand if that's being received.
Mhm.
Because what we think we're giving or saying or explaining is landing very differently,
Yeah.
especially with their experience. That's the
Yeah.
thing about previous relationships that didn't work was that we none of us knew how to communicate because we only communicated our needs, but we
Yeah.
didn't
Yes.
communicate what we would do for them as well. Like this is
Yeah.
what I'm bringing to the table, but this is what I would love for you to bring to the table as well. It was
Yeah.
just me, never you.
Wow. Yes. So what I'm hearing with communication is not, again, it's not just words, because we know that it takes the tone and the body language and all of those things. And what I do know for a fact is it is the lifeblood of our relationship. So if that's not happening, our relationship is suffering. But
Yeah.
I also hear, you know um use your words versus reacting. So
Yeah.
that's huge. And how is what I'm saying being received by the other person? Because we process information based on our perspective and our experiences. So, if nothing else, you walk away with that when it comes to communication. What about emotional intimacy? What would you tell a newlywed, about emotional intimacy?
Emotional intimacy, again, it really goes to understanding your partner. You
Hmm.
know, when you have an understanding of what they need,
Hmm.
and they understand what you need, that's, you know, that's the only way it actually works.
Yes.
It's important, and it's important to keep in mind, you know, those values that mean a lot to them,
Hmm.
and find compromise in that, you know? I don't know if I answered your question
Yeah,
correctly.
you did. Yeah, yeah. Because the thing is, and that's for one, that's because that's so broad, because it's going to be different,
Yeah,
for each person. But showing up with for one, your partner needs to be emotionally available. That helps. you know,
that's a big
um,
one, yeah.
that definitely helps. But when we're in those moments where um, you know because what I'm for your relationship and mine, 'cause and again, so many similarities, of course, because of, the cultural differences as well. But when we're talking about, being emotionally present and being able to tap into your partner beyond just what you're seeing, because our husbands could have easily gotten turned off by our big presence, like, oh my God, she way too loud. She's too much. She take up the whole room, you know.
Right.
But it's so funny how even now going forward, you know, and the probably, it's funny how I've never met your husband, but I can almost tell that even though he may not be the loudest person in the room, but his presence is felt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he walks in and, yep, oh, that's Karen's husband, or that's Fatima's husband. Because we I'm not busy trying to make him feel bad for being not as loud as me, not
Yeah.
as outspoken as me, no, because I like his steadiness. I like his even keel. Because girl,
Yeah.
can you imagine if both of us was as turned up?
It's so yes. Actually, now that you mention it, I was just gonna say in the word that came up again, like I mentioned, it was the contrast. They
Yeah.
are our grounding because we
Yeah.
are so, profound and loud. Like when I go to events or do anything, um, I get so overwhelmed with the energy there that matches my energy. But then I gotta go home and being around his presence, it almost brings me back to that grounding,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And you're right. I remember right now when you mentioned, I used to say, you have to be like, we would go to an event or something, and I'm like, you know, you, uh, you got to interact because he's such an introvert.
Yeah.
And, I wanted him to go to these social circles, and he's like, that's just not who I am. But when I see him at work, I'm like, is this the same guy I'm married to? Like the way he commands the room,
Yes.
people
Yeah.
around him, he doesn't have to, he's not a man of many words, but people feel his energy.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we come together, we're just like one big fireball, even though I'm loud and he's very quiet,
Yeah.
he doesn't have to, and I think that's where he holds space for me. I think I
Wow.
mentioned to you before where he's like, in the feng shui, the Chinese calendar, I'm
Yeah.
the horse. And he's like, when I'm running around doing all kinds of crazy things, he's like, hey, come here, my horse, stop galloping the meadows and let's get focused. Because I'm just a big ball of energy doing all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
But he's very centered. And,
Mhm.
again, the contrast of who we are, his love is being with family,
Yeah.
financial security, calmness, just, you know, everything that I wasn't used to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's party. I love to be around people,
Mhm.
engagement. And he's come to meet me halfway. He's like, all right, we can
Yeah.
do that, which is great. And then I've learned to tone it down slightly,
Yes.
and enjoy the different world that we both bring to
Mhm.
each
Mhm.
other. But yeah, it's still like, the worlds are here.
Yeah.
He loves this. I love that. But
Yeah.
then we turn it around and we anchor
Yeah.
ourselves in that love.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And that's at the end of the day, that's what I want. That's my desire anyway, for every couple to be able to say, okay, I am not abandoning who I am. You are
No.
not abandoning who you are, but we are building something completely different that never existed before. And how can we do that and, be able to use what we've built to change the trajectory of the lives of our children and our children's children? Because at the end of the day, that's what I truly believe that I'm called to do, to help people have healthy relationships so they can step into their true calling. That way, they're not distracted by unhealthy relationships. And if anything that's been said on this podcast today can change the life of a spouse or, a wife, a marriage, change the lives of the children that will come as a result of that, then our job here is done. Fatima, I want to thank you so very much for being with me today. Again, girl, it's always good just connecting with you. And I know we don't get to do it as often, but I so thank you for, for stopping in and speaking life into us today. Again, thank you for being my guest. And for those of you out there, thank you so very much for tuning in to another episode of The State of Our Union and the Fight to Keep It. Have an amazing rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending this time with me on the State of Our Union. My hope is that today's conversation gave you something to reflect on, something to talk about, and maybe even something to try in your own relationship. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone you love or someone who needs to hear it. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. Remember, strong relationships aren't built on perfection. They're built on intention, honesty, and the daily decision to choose each other. Until next time, guard your heart, nurture your love, and keep investing in the state of your union.